Christmas Eve was supposed to be about warmth, about family, about coming home. But that night I walked into a house colder than the December wind outside. My name is Lily Summers, I'm 24 years old, and for the past 4 years, I've been the invisible backbone of my family. Paying the bills, keeping the lights on, making sure the heat didn't fail in the dead of winter. And yet on the night the world celebrated love and connection, my father pointed across the dinner table and told me to get out, no warning. No conversation, just the sharp, heartless command. You're a burden, you don't belong here anymore. As I packed my life into a single suitcase, I made a silent promise. If they could throw me away like nothing, I could walk away like everything. And they would feel every consequence of their decision. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people you fought so hard to protect? Would you stay silent, or would you finally choose yourself? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe no one should have to earn love with sacrifice, hit subscribe for more true stories that remind us why choosing yourself is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. When people hear the word home, they think of safety. They think of laughter, maybe the smell of cookies baking, or a living room full of old memories. For me, home had long ago become something else. A house with peeling paint, a living room where silence spoke louder than any Christmas carol, and a family that didn't see me, just the bills I paid. I lived with my parents, Walter and Carla Summers, and my younger brother Nathan, 17 years old, quiet, always clutching his headphones like armor. He was the only reason I stayed longer than I should have. After college, I got a job at a local insurance company. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't even particularly well paid, but it was enough to keep the electricity running when Dad's severance check ran dry, enough to keep the water from being shut off when Mom's part-time hours at the library barely covered groceries. Enough to make the old rattling heater survive another brutal Ohio winter. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it was understood I was the safety net. No one thanked, but everyone expected. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that family meant sacrifice, that if I just worked harder, just gave a little more, maybe they'd see me, not just what I provided. But slowly, quietly, resentment grew like mold in the corners of that house. My father, once a proud mechanic, now sat at the dinner table most days, swirling cheap wine in his glass, and muttering about how life had cheated him. My mother, who used to hum while folding laundry, now barely spoke, unless it was to ask if I could cover another bill. And me, I stopped asking for anything. No birthday gifts, no help with my car repairs. Not even a thank you when the heat clicked on during a snowstorm. Nathan noticed, of course. He saw the way I flinched when Dad slammed a cabinet door, the way I pulled out my wallet before anyone else could reach for it, the way I shrank smaller and smaller until even my own presence felt like an intrusion. I told myself it was temporary, that things would get better, that if I just held on a little longer, maybe we'd find our way back to being a family again. But deep down, I think I always knew. Some things once broken, stay broken. And that Christmas Eve, with the smell of overcooked ham hanging heavy in the kitchen, with the radio playing a scratchy version of Silent Night, and with my father's glassy eyes fixed on me like I was some stranger he regretted letting through the door. That was the night the illusion shattered, for good family isn't just blood, it's how you're treated when you have nothing left to give. And that night they made it clear I was no longer family, I was disposable. The only thing they hadn't realized yet was that when I walked out that door, I wasn't just taking my suitcase. I was taking the roof over their heads, the warmth in the walls, and every safety net they had so long taken for granted. The Christmas tree was already drooping when I walked in that night, its faded ornaments clinging to brittle branches, tangled in a half-lit string of dollar store lights. Mom was setting down a plate of dry ham on the table. Dad sat at the head like a king surveying a crumbling castle, his wine glass nearly empty. Nathan gave me a small, hopeful smile, the only flicker of real warmth in the entire house. Dinner started in thick silence. No one said grace, no one said Merry Christmas, just the clink of silverware against chipped plates and the hollow hum of an old radio crackling from the kitchen. I tried to smile, tried to pretend, scooped a little mashed potato onto my plate, nodded at Nathan, reached for the gravy. That's when Dad slammed his knife into the table. The sharp crack split the air like a gunshot. Everyone froze, even the radio seemed to hesitate mid-song. He stared at me, eyes bloodshot, voice low and cold. "You're a burden, Lily, and you can't live here anymore." At first, I thought I had misheard him. My fork hovered midair. Mom let out a dry, nervous laugh, like maybe if she pretended it was a joke it would be. But Dad's stare never wavered. Hard final. Nathan's mouth dropped open. His fork slipped from his fingers and clattered against his plate. I set my utensils down carefully, deliberately, as if any sudden movement might shatter the last fragile thread holding the night together. "What did you just say?" I asked. Even my voice didn't sound like mine anymore. "You heard me," Dad said. "This is my house, and I'm saying enough is enough. You need to move out." I looked at Mom, begging her silently to say something to stop this, to remember everything I had sacrificed. But she kept her head down, hands folded tight in her lap, like a scolded child. Dad sat back satisfied, as if he had won some invisible war. As if throwing me out was an act of courage, not cowardice. Nathan found his voice first. "If they can kick her out this easily," he said, his voice cracking, "who's next?" Dad ignored him. Mom bit her lip. The old Christmas song in the background wavered and died. I swallowed hard. No tears, no begging, no screaming. They had made their choice. Now it was my turn. I leaned back in my chair, met Dad's eyes, and said simply, "All right," a smirk curled at the edge of his mouth. Victory. He thought he'd broken me, but he had no idea what was about to happen. I stood up, gathered my half-eaten plate, carried it to the sink. Each step felt heavy, like walking underwater. Before I left the kitchen, I turned to Nathan, gave him a small nod. A silent promise, "I'm not abandoning you." No one else moved. No one else spoke. The clinking of knives and forks resumed, hollow and joyless. I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door behind me, and pulled out my suitcase. No goodbyes, no explanations, no second chances. They had thrown me away like I was nothing. Now they would see just how much nothing had been holding them up. As I packed my clothes, my books, the tiny pieces of a life built on exhaustion and duty, I felt something inside me harden, not bitterness, not rage, resolve. Tonight I would leave tomorrow. The house would start to fall apart, and they would have no one left to blame but themselves. Upstairs, my room felt smaller than it ever had before. The familiar walls that once comforted me now pressed in like strangers. I packed quietly, methodically. Clothes folded, notebooks stacked. Everything I had bought with overtime shifts now tucked into a single battered suitcase. Each item I packed was a reminder that I had poured my life into a house that saw me only as a convenience. A soft knock broke the silence, Nathan's voice barely a whisper. "Lily, are you really leaving?" I opened the door. He stood there hunched like he was bracing for a blow. "I have to," I said, voice steady. "They made their decision. Now I'm making mine." Nathan's hands clenched at his sides. "But without you, who's going to pay for everything? The electricity, the internet." I exhaled slowly. He wasn't being selfish. He was scared of the cold that would creep into this house when I left. Scared of the darkness that had nothing to do with broken light bulbs. "I know," I said gently, "but Nathan, I can't keep being their lifeline. If all they do is cut me down, I deserve to live too." He sat down on the bed, staring at the half-empty room. "I want to come with you," he whispered. My heart cracked, but I shook my head. "You're still in school. You're still a minor. You need to stay, at least until you can leave on your own terms." He looked down at his sneakers. Silent, defeated. "Just hold on a little longer," I said, touching his shoulder. "When you're ready, I'll help you, I promise." Nathan nodded, but the look in his eyes broke me in ways my parents never could. The look of someone realizing home wasn't safe anymore. I finished packing while he sat there refusing to leave the room. As the clock ticked past midnight, I zipped up the suitcase and placed it by the door. No one else came upstairs. No one said goodbye. I pulled out my phone. Opened the banking app one by one. I disconnected my payment information from every household account. Electricity, internet, water. The shared credit card Mom used for groceries. No announcements, no explanations. They didn't deserve that. They had been warned with every sacrifice I made. Every unpaid thank you. As the final bill disappeared from my account, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a stillness I hadn't felt in years. Downstairs, the living room light flickered behind the closed door. They were still watching TV, pretending tonight was normal. pretending I hadn't just been erased from their family with a few cruel words. I wheeled my suitcase to the top of the stairs. The old wood creaked under my steps, a soft funeral march. No one looked up as I passed the living room. No one called out. No last-minute apologies. No sudden regrets. Only the glow of the television and the heavy, suffocating silence of a house already collapsing in on itself. I opened the front door. The freezing December wind slapped my face sharp and merciless. But I didn't shiver. I breathed it in like freedom. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I walked to my old car parked at the curb, loaded the trunk, climbed into the driver's seat. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. This was it, the moment I stopped living for them and started living for myself. As I pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. Not once. Because when you finally escape the place that broke you, you don't need a rearview mirror. You only need the road ahead. I spent that first night at Monica's place sleeping on her old pull-out couch. The springs poked into my back. The blanket was thin, and yet it was the most peaceful sleep I had had in years. No slamming doors, no muffled arguments, no heavy footsteps pacing the halls like threats. Just the soft hum of Monica's refrigerator, and the quiet knowledge that for once, I didn't owe anyone anything. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the small apartment windows, I brewed a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and began the quiet process of cutting myself free. I logged into the utility portals. Even though I had removed my payment information, my name was still listed as the account holder. Technically responsible, click by click. I severed every tie. Electricity account canceled. Internet service canceled. Water and gas canceled. Streaming services, they piggybacked off, gone. The secondary credit card I had opened for groceries closed and frozen. Every click was a tiny reclamation of my freedom. Not out of revenge, but out of survival. If they wanted me out of their lives, they would also lose everything I had built for them. I leaned back in the chair, breathing out slowly. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music swelling in the background, just a steady, quiet strength filling my chest. I had done it. I had truly let go. At least that's what I thought. The first few days passed in strange, almost eerie calm. I went to work. I shared simple dinners with Monica. I read books before bed without fear of being interrupted by shouting from downstairs. But chaos never stays contained for long, especially when you take away the crutches that people have leaned on for too long. On Wednesday, my phone started buzzing nonstop. 5 missed calls from Mom. 2 from Dad. 1 text from Nathan, the power's out. Dad's losing it. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because caring had cost me everything once before. An hour later, another text from Mom. Why isn't the TV working? The internet's down. What's going on? I stared at the message. 4 years of silent sacrifices. 4 years of being invisible. And the only time they noticed me was when their comforts were stripped away. That evening, while Monica and I stirred a pot of pasta in her tiny kitchen, the phone rang again. This time, some instinct told me to pick up. Lily, what's happening? We can't watch Netflix. The power's out. Your father's furious. Mom's voice trembled between fear and confusion. I kept my tone calm. Colder than the December air outside. Who do you think was paying for all that these past 4 years? Silence crackled through the line, then a broken whisper. You, but your father thought. Exactly, I cut in. You believed whatever he said. Now you can live with his decisions. I ended the call before she could say another word, because it didn't matter anymore. Explaining myself to people who chose not to see me was like shouting into a void. I thought that would be the end of it. That without me, they would figure it out. Struggle a little maybe, but adapt. I underestimated them. I underestimated just how deeply some people cling to their own pride, even as their world crumbles around them. The next day, an email alert from my bank shattered any illusion of peace. Suspicious login attempt from an unfamiliar device. I opened the app immediately. 3 failed attempts. A password reset request. Only one person would be desperate enough to do that. Dad, I called Nathan immediately. He answered on the second ring, his voice low and tense. Lily? Dad's digging through Mom's old notebooks. The ones where she wrote down passwords. My stomach tightened. Thanks, Nathan, stay out of it. Okay, I'll handle it. That night, I locked down everything. New passwords, 2-step authentication, biometric verification, frozen credit alerts on every account, layer after layer of security. A silent message that screamed louder than any argument ever could. You don't get to own me anymore. I wasn't the scared girl at the dinner table anymore. I was my own person. And no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't take that away. I thought, after locking everything down, the chaos would die out. That without access to my money, my accounts, my life, they would be forced to move on. I was wrong. 3 days after I left, Nathan texted during my shift. Internet got cut this morning. Dad punched the fuse box. Mom's crying again. I stared at the message phone, heavy in my hand. It was starting the slow unraveling of everything they took for granted. And there was nothing I needed to do but stay away. That evening, when I left the office, my phone lit up with 6 missed calls. All from Mom. The 7th call, I answered. Her voice hit me like a cold slap. Hoarse, hysterical. Lily, what have you done? The house is dark. No TV, no hot water. Your father's losing it. What did you do? I answered calmly. Voice steady like stone. I stopped paying for everything, a gasp. Then shrieking, you can't do this. This is your home. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, it's the house where you kicked me out. I'm just honoring your decision. Dead silence only. Her ragged breathing filled the line. Then she whispered, broken. Your father says you're trying to get revenge. I let out a dry laugh. No, I'm just finally living my life. And you hate that it no longer includes you. I hung up before she could twist it into something uglier, because there was no point explaining freedom to people who had only ever understood chains. The next morning, another email from my bank. Suspicious login attempt blocked. Another desperate, angry attempt to claw their way back into the life they had rejected. I called Nathan. He picked up on the first ring, Lily. He whispered, Dad's been tearing the house apart, digging through old notebooks, yelling about how you owe him. I closed my eyes. Pain, not sadness. Pain. Because somewhere deep inside, a small part of me still wished it could have been different, but it wasn't, and it would never be. Listen carefully. I said, if anything weird happens, lock the doors. Call me immediately. Stay safe first. Always. I will, he promised. I'll keep my phone with me all night. That night, I barely slept, the weight of years pressing down on my chest. When the sun rose, I stumbled out of bed hoping for peace. Instead, Monica rushed into the living room, her face pale. Lily, someone's pounding on the door. I froze. Heart hammering. Peeking through the peephole, my stomach twisted into knots. It was my father. Red-faced eyes wild, slamming his fists against the wood like a madman. Lily, open up. You think you can just walk away? You think leaving solves anything? Monica trembled behind me. Are you calling the police? I nodded already, dialing 911. What's your emergency? My father is outside threatening us. He's trying to break in. Stay calm, stay inside. Officers are on the way. 3 minutes. That's all we had to hold out. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. Through the door, I heard him ranting, raging, accusing me of betrayal, of destroying the family, of owing him my life. But I stood still, hands steady, heart pounding but defiant. He didn't own me anymore. He never would again. The sirens came fast, red and blue lights flashing through the hallway. The police knocked calm but firm. Police, open up. I opened the door just enough for them to slip inside. They faced him down immediately. Sir, you are disturbing the peace. You need to leave. I'm her father, he roared. I have rights. Not like this, the officer said quietly. Not by force. Dad lunged toward me, spitting furious words. You think you're better than us. You think walking away makes you good. The officers grabbed him, restraining him gently but firmly. You made your choice, I said softly, and now you have to live with it. The handcuffs clicked into place, a sound I would remember forever, cold, final. As they led him away, he hissed one last threat over his shoulder. You'll regret this, Lily. You'll pay for betraying your family. But I didn't flinch, not anymore, because the truth was, I wasn't betraying anyone. I was saving myself. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood. Sometimes survival looks like standing at a door you were once thrown out of and refusing to ever step back inside. The weeks that followed felt both surreal and painfully real. After my father's arrest, I filed a restraining order, changed my phone number, moved in full-time with Samantha, my coworker who helped me sign the lease for a tiny apartment close to my job. It wasn't much secondhand furniture, peeling paint on the windowsills, but it was mine. Every inch of it, mine. No more slammed doors. No more accusations hurled like grenades across the dinner table. Just quiet mornings with sunlight streaming through cheap blinds, and the steady healing rhythm of a life finally lived on my own terms. I rebuilt everything. New bank accounts, new passwords, new routines, piece by piece. I reclaimed the parts of myself I had once buried to keep a broken family afloat. Nathan stayed behind just like he had promised, endured the cold stares, the shouted arguments, the endless blame games. He waited until he turned 18, waited until he could leave on his own terms too. When the day came, he didn't throw a party. He just sent me a text, simple final. I'm ready, sis. I drove to that crumbling old house one last time, picked him up with nothing but a duffel bag and a smile that spoke of freedom. We didn't look back. Not once today. Nathan lives in the college dorms studying graphic design. Every time he calls me, his voice sounds a little lighter, a little stronger, a little more alive. As for my parents, they eventually lost the house, evicted for unpaid bills. Last I heard, they were living in a rundown apartment across town, still blaming everyone but themselves. But that's not my story anymore. It stopped being my story the night I chose to walk away, because the truth is, sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing yourself. You don't owe your loyalty to people who tear you apart. You don't owe your life to those who only take and never give. And you certainly don't owe your silence to those who confuse control for care. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself freedom. You owe yourself the chance to build a life you don't have to escape from. And that's exactly what I did. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the places that taught you to doubt your worth. Sometimes survival doesn't look like fighting louder. It looks like choosing silence, choosing distance, choosing yourself. I used to think family was unconditional, that no matter what they did, I had to stay, had to forgive, had to endure. But family isn't just blood. It's how they hold you when you're breaking. It's how they lift you when you're too tired to stand. It's how they love you. Not because of what you provide, but simply because you exist. If that's missing, you have every right to leave. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because I finally loved myself enough to stop bleeding for people who would never notice. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved just to save yourself? Would you have stayed like Nathan tried to, or left when the door slammed shut behind you like I did? Share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that healing isn't betrayal, it's survival. And if you believe everyone deserves the chance to start over, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't anger, it's peace.